All right, welcome to the Lovecraft E-Zine podcast. Today is May the 28th, 2017, and our special guest today is Jeff Thomas. Hey, Jeff.
Hey.
How are you?
Not bad. How about yourself?
Not too bad. Let's do introductions, and let's do a prize first. Talk about prizes. One of our listeners, David Del Cole, David, I hope I'm saying your last name correctly, is donating some books for prizes. We're going to give away one of his books today, Children of Lovecraft, edited by Ellen Datlow. So that'll be today's prize, and I'll tell you how to win that a little bit later on. Let's see, what else do we have here? Oh, Kelly and I recorded the very first Patreon podcast the other day.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, I think that went really well. Friday during the day. Talked about Get Out and Supernatural. All of it with spoilers. So I'll have that up sometime in the middle of the week.
Heavy spoilers on everything there.
Heavy spoilers. And, if any points of view that we differed on, obviously I was right and you were wrong.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Okay, good. Our email's lovecraftezine@gmail.com. I received some very nice emails from listeners, and I tell you what, it always makes my day. So I appreciate it. If you like the show, let me know. Let's do introductions. Let's start with Rick and work our way over.
Rick Lay, writer.
Peter.
Pete Rollick, jack of all trades.
Okay, Kelly.
Kelly Young, executive editor of Strange Eons today, I guess.
Just today.
Just today?
We'll see how it all goes.
And Derek's with us again today. Hey, Derek, you want to do a quick introduction? You're muted, buddy.
Derek Hudson, publisher of Hippocampus Press.
There you go. Perfect. Jeff, all right, I can't imagine there's anybody out there actually listening to my podcast who doesn't know who you are, but for the benefit of those who do not know who you are, talk a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I Jeffrey Thomas. I'm a writer of horror and science fiction and weird fiction, and my latest short story collection is The Endless Fall, published by Lovecraft E-Zine Press.
Yeah, and you have a little munchkin in the background.
Yeah, she thinks she's being sneaky and furtive, but not so much.
Jeff is one of those guys who, I've said this many times, I guess, on this podcast, but there are so many talented people in the world, but there are a lot less people who are talented and yet humble. And Jeff's one of those people, and I'm privileged to know him and be friends with him. So,
outwardly humble.
Outwardly humble, yeah.
Inwardly quite narcissistic.
You're the most humble guy anyone has ever seen.
I am the humblest person in the universe. Nobody is more humble than me.
I too am very humble.
I am more humble than you.
Matt was kind of bummed that he couldn't be here today because he wanted to pepper you with questions, I guess. Matt wrote the introduction to The Endless Fall. For those who are watching, here's the cover. The Endless Fall and Other Weird Fictions by Jeffrey Thomas. And got a lot of nice reviews on Amazon already, and it's selling quite well. So thanks to everyone who's bought a copy. Let me read the last paragraph. This is Matt Carpenter from his introduction. It should be obvious that I admire Jeff Thomas's writing. I love getting lost in the world he creates, and I can empathize with the difficulties his characters face because they are just so real. I envy those making your first acquaintance with this author. I think you wrote a nice introduction for you, Jeff.
Yes, I was very pleased with it. Very pleased.
Let's start by talking about The Endless Fall then. The stories were collected from a lot of different places. Yeah. You want to talk about several of the stories in here? One was dedicated to W.H. Pugmire. Yeah. The other one was another one was inspired by Nick Gucker.
Mm-hmm. There's actually, it's funny. I hadn't really thought about it, but there are stories in there that are tributes to other writers. Like the opening story, Jar of Mist, was written for a special issue of the Lovecraft easing publication that was devoted to Pugmire. So I set that story in Sesqua Valley, Pugmire's setting that he uses frequently. And there's another story in there called Snake Wine, which was for a Laird Barron tribute anthology, The Children of Old Age. There's a story in there called The Prosthesis that was for the Thomas Ligotti tribute anthology, Grimscribe's Puppets. And so, yeah, these people were, a number of different people inspired different stories here. And the story, the title story, The Endless Fall, was written, the inspiration for that was the cover art by Nick Gucker, which already existed. Right. I met Nick at Necronomicon in 2013, and I bought a print of that art from him. And I just thought it would be such a great cover. So I asked, it was already pre-existing art. I guess it was a poster for a film festival or a music festival or something, I forget.
Film festival in Seattle, yeah.
Was it a film festival?
Yeah.
And I asked them if we could use it for the cover. And I just thought it was such a fantastic image. And so I wrote the story, The Endless Fall, inspired by the cover to kind of, I wanted to write something original for the collection and something that would directly refer to the cover imagery.
And not only that, but you said something nice to me the other day in an email that I hadn't realized. The title to The Endless Fall and a little bit of the setting of The Endless Fall.
Yeah, The Endless Fall takes place, it's about an astronaut who crash lands on a mysterious world where it's autumn. And there's some strange time distortions in the story. And so knowing your love of autumn, I thought, that was kind of the reasoning for me to set the story in an autumnal kind of a place. And The Endless Fall, one of the meanings for it, for that title has to do, it's kind of like saying an endless autumn, right? Like forever autumn, like that wonderful song. So I did that with you in mind, knowing your love of autumn, and just to, again, drawing inspiration from Nick Gucker's imagery, knowing your aesthetic. I thought it would be in the spirit of collaboration to kind of draw these things in, these elements in.
Any other stories that you want to comment on in the collection?
Well, there's a lot of stories in there that I'm very proud of, and I guess one of my favorites, my own personal favorites, not to color anybody's opinions, but it would be Those Above, which is set in kind of a steampunk world, of kind of a alternate Victorian world. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they're all, most of the stories are from anthologies and various publications of recent years. There's one story in there called The Red Machine that was in a chapbook of mine that came out back in 1997. That's the only story that's kind of older in nature. But I thought it's it's kind of a rarity. Not many people would have seen it, and I thought it would be fun to put that in there too. And hopefully it's kind of an emotional story, and hopefully it will resonate with people that way.
Yeah. When you tell people you're a writer and they ask you what kind of fiction that you write, what do you tell them? What kind of fiction do you write?
Yeah, it was hard for me to say for years I write horror fiction and science fiction as if they were separate things, whereas I kind of knew that I was combining them, but it just seemed hard to make people sometimes understand that these could be combined or shouldn't be differentiated. That you shouldn't even have to explain what kind of writing you do. When there was a resurgence of interest in weird fiction, or at least people describing their work as weird fiction, that felt kind of liberating to me. I felt it was a little easier to be able to say that I write weird fiction. It seemed to encompass horror and science fiction, and also that kind of more nebulous kind of areas of fantastical fiction. It just seemed more all-encompassing. And so if I had to easily describe what I do, I would say I write weird fiction. Then again, there are a lot of people who, like if I was talking to my coworkers at my day job and I said I wrote weird fiction, they wouldn't think of it as a category so much as a, oh, your stories are weird then, right? You know.
Exactly.
It's so, you know, it's you almost wish you didn't have to describe what you write. But
well, on that note, what does weird fiction mean to you? We had Michael Kelly on the podcast last week, and he is the series editor for and publishes the year's best weird fiction. So, you know, he had his response. What's your response to that?
I'm sure he could articulate it much better than I could. It's hard for me to articulate that. I'd rather let my word speak for how I feel about weird fiction, or express how I approach it.
Yeah.
It's really hard for me to articulate it. I think it's fantastical work. Man, that's
one of those, you know it when you see it type things.
Yeah. It's work that bends, that distorts our sense of reality. It's not always overtly horrific, and it's not always overtly like science fiction-y where it's based on technology and so forth. It's a feeling, as opposed. It's like I said, it's kind of a nebulous area to work in, but it involves distortions of reality.
For those who are just learning about you now, what other books do you have out? Talk a little bit about them.
I'm sure I'm best known from the books I've set in my world of Punktown, the short story Punktown collection Punktown that was published by Jeff Vandermeer back in 2000. And there's been numerous other Punktown novels and short story collections since then. But probably my books that have been read the most, because they were released by a mass market publisher, would be Deadstock and Blue War. And the rights reverted to me recently for those, and I released them myself for Kindle. But those would probably be the ones that reach the most hands. But I've also written a series of stories that are set in kind of my vision of Hades. The first of those I wrote was a novel called Letters from Hades. And there's been a few novels and short story collections since then set in that world. And but I don't like to limit myself to Punktown. I like to. I don't want to be stuck in one setting or get too comfortable like that. I like to try to be versatile and flexible.
I saw one review on Amazon of The Endless Fall, and I'm paraphrasing, but they said something along the lines of, if you're a big fan of Punktown, you'll love this book, even though there's no Punktown stories in this book. Just because,
I like that.
You know, you saw that one too, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So.
Yeah, because I think even when I'm not writing in Punktown, there are certain. Punktown is a world where I can pretty much do anything, and I don't come back with the same characters all the time. Very infrequently would a character reappear in my Punktown stories, or a plot line or something. It just doesn't work that way. Every Punktown story is supposed to be able to function on its own, and so I do certain types of. But there are certain themes I'm attracted to and approaches, and I use them within Punktown stories and in other stories. So I can see what that statement is saying, that there might be a story could be set in an entirely different world, different circumstances, but have the same kind of character or tone that I use in my Punktown stories.
Right.
Character the stories are very much about the characters and and sometimes the environment that they're in, whatever that might be, and their interrelation with it. That environment is very important to me in the stories, and I think the environment can reflect the character's psychological state. And it's almost like an outward manifestation of their psychological state. I think I like to work with that in mind, that approach in mind.
So at this point, those who are listening who've not read you yet, they're probably going, well, they're talking a lot about Punktown. What exactly is Punktown?
Punktown is it's a city on another world in the future that has been colonized by Earth people, but it's also a melting pot of people from other worlds and even other dimensions. And they all live there, not so harmoniously. And it's a very crime-ridden city. And so it's the adventures of all these Punktown citizens. Follow this one for a while and go after this one, and sometimes, rarely, they'll cross paths. More likely, you're going to see a location reappear, a certain street or a certain restaurant or something, as opposed to an individual. Maybe sometimes you'll hear somebody referenced who was appeared in another story. The only major character I've ever brought back would be this Private Eye, Jeremy Stake, and he was the protagonist of my novels, Deadstock and Blue War, and he's been in a handful of shorter works since then too. But other than that, it's kind of each Punktown story follows different.
Guys, do you have questions for Jeff?
So Jeff, you recently opened up Punktown to other writers.
Yes. Brian Sammons wanted to do a Punktown shared world anthology, and that was an exciting project, and it was exciting for me to read the stories that came in for that, and your story among them, Pete. And that's going to be a really cool book. It's got a lot. I was just blown away that so many talented people could write such a diversity of great stories set in my world. It was just it was just kind of makes my head spin to think that could ever have appeared. So that'll be coming out from Dark Regions Press. I don't have a release date for that, but really, really proud of the quality of work that came in for that book.
Yeah, I think a lot. I think Joe did a story for that.
Yes.
And who else?
Joe, Glenn Owen Barris, and but just a bunch of really good stories.
I'm gonna see what everybody else did because we haven't seen each other's work.
Yeah, I felt privileged that I got to read them all. I read them. Brian Sammons edited it, but I read the stories just to make sure there was nothing that we wanted people to feel free writing these stories. But if there was something that really was contradictory, ran into very little of that. It was cool that people did their homework. That people had already been familiar with it, or that they did a little reading to get familiar with it.
Yeah, going back and reading the stories was just a blast from the past again. Yeah, and just how everything sort of fits together, but there's no real overlap between the stories. It's a real masterwork of world building, and you've done a really good job there. Thank you.
I'm proud that Centipede Press is going to do a massive Punktown omnibus, and it's going to be the way it stands right now, it's going to be 3 volumes. And I've been proofreading all the stories for that and kind of going over them and polishing them up here and there a little bit. I want these to be the definitive versions of these stories. And so I'm down to the 3rd volume now. And in fact, I'm caught up. What I'm supposed to do is write a new novella or a couple of new short stories for it, so there'll be some new material. Unfortunately, right now, I'm kind of in a writer's block period right now. And I started 4 Punktown short stories with the omnibus in mind, and I couldn't complete them. And I don't know if I should try to finish one of those or start a new one or whatever. I'm just having a little rough time right now. Writing.
I know how that goes. And of course, Willem knows how that goes. It's like every 6 months, I'm never going to write again.
I remember he used to say that to me, and I'd be like, thinking like, what's the matter with you? How can you not want to write? How can you not be able to write? And now whenever I feel that way, I always think of Willem's like, yeah, now I know.
Yeah, it's just part of the process. You get hung up.
but I was supposed to have this new material delivered last December. Still, yeah, I got to do something about that.
Yeah.
When does Centipede want to have that out? Approximately.
There's no like in stone release date for it, but
Okay.
yeah, he checks in with me once in a while, and I really gotta get on top of that. I don't know. I got a day
All right.
job and all the kids and everything. So
Yeah. All right. Who else has questions for Jeff? Nobody?
Well, I'd like to know, Jeff, what kind of writing schedule do you keep? And now you're talking about writer's block. Is this a kind of writer's block where you can't write anything, or is it just now that you're kind of on the ball for getting some Punktown stuff done, you're finding that to be very difficult to write?
it's been anything recently. It's been anything. I wrote a new story for a collection that Derek's going to be putting out in August, Haunted Worlds, and I was able to write a new story for that. And I thought, that's it. I broke through. I'm good again. But after after that one, it's still rough for me to write anything. And I really don't know. This is unusual for me. I've always been pretty prolific. I don't know if it has to do with getting older or just or whatever, less energy, or just, I don't know. Hopefully it's just a short-lived thing.
Do you have a usual schedule that you try to keep, or?
No, I don't. It's funny. A lot of my writing of recent years, I probably got too dependent on this, was I had a lot of downtime at work. So I was actually doing a lot of writing at work. Material that will appear in the Haunted Worlds, for instance, was written almost entirely at my job, during downtime. And I got so used to that. And now the nature of my job has changed. There's less free time, and I'm less apt to risk getting caught by the boss writing like he didn't notice, But so I think I got too dependent on writing at work. I've got to get back into some kind of I got to get off Facebook for one thing, But I've got to maybe try to create a new regimen for myself or something. I don't know.
There's something about that where when you're at the day job, creativity strikes and you're just like, oh my God, I got to get home and get this done. But as soon as you get home, you're kind of like, I wonder what my email's like today. It's very strange how that can shift so quickly when you're not at work.
Exactly. I get all this inspiration. Oh boy, when I get home, I'm going to do this and do that. And I think by the time I get home, I've run out of steam, and all I want to do is pour a bourbon.
Maybe go ahead, guys. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that years and years ago, when I was writing screenplays heavily, I actually I went through a time when I was getting paid to do something and I couldn't produce, and I went to a therapist. And I told her, this is my problem. I don't really understand why I can't write, especially now that I'm getting paid to write. And she said, well, let's break this down. Do you think you could write an hour a day? And I said, oh, God, no, that's ridiculous. And she said, do you think you could write 30 minutes a day? And I said, oh, at this point, no. She said, do you think you could write for 10 minutes? And I said, well, fuck, if I can't write for 10 minutes, then I probably shouldn't call myself a writer. And she said, okay, let's start there. Just sit down. You have to write for 10 minutes each day. And that broke my streak. I would sit down. The first day I wrote for 10 minutes. The second day I forced myself into the seat. I wrote for 30 minutes. And then the next day I was just off and running again.
That's interesting. That's great.
It is. I'll have to try that. I guess it's not so intimidating that way. I think that's what it is. I get intimidated by and kind of overwhelmed by, and the more projects I agree to, the more under pressure I feel. I think that maybe 10 minutes, it's not so intimidating.
Yeah.
Another way to look at that is it's if you write for 10 minutes a day for a few days until you break out of that, that's 10 minutes a day that you're writing that you weren't writing before.
Yeah.
And that was the point that she was making with me. And it had kind of shamed me into going, well, geez, of course I can write for 10 minutes.
Yeah. I like it. I'm going to have to try that for sure.
What's probably, I'm guessing, maybe part of the problem is setting you are so used to writing at work, and now you can't do that.
That's my routine.
Yeah.
Yeah, then it had been that way for a number of years, a few years. So, yeah.
That's really great advice, Kelly. I think that's great advice for anybody listening too, who's a writer or beginning writer. Sorry, Pete. What?
No, I find that if I can get out of the house and go to my coffee shop, I really do away with a lot of distractions. And I still have access to the internet, but I'm not watching TV, listening to music. I'm focused in on this. And it's also sort of, there's also a shame factor in that. It's like, I'm telling my wife, I'm leaving the house. I'm going to the coffee shop for 8 hours. She wants to see me do something. If she's going to lose me for 8 hours,
yeah,
it better be.
Yeah.
Better come back with something. Yeah.
Right. That's laundry. That's like 8 loads of laundry I could have done. But yeah, so there's that sort of shame effect that goes in there as well.
I've wondered about that too. If I were to write at a coffee shop or in a library or something, I'd have to get a good laptop.
Yeah.
But I've wondered if that might be another thing that would make it easier for me.
You know what I bought, Jeff, about a year and a half ago is one of those little Chromebooks. Very inexpensive, and they're really built for just web surfing and word processing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I bought one of those for my son. I might want to invest in one for myself.
Yeah, I love it. I don't write in coffee shops or anything, but it's nice to be able to sit on the couch with it, instead of at my desk. So, one of our listeners, Dave, says, Jeff, who does Jeff read? Or what, I would say.
I read. I like to read. I like not to limit myself to reading within the horror, science fiction, weird fiction, areas exclusively. I like to kind of have a more diverse. So I read everybody from. I read some of my favorite writers are Martin Cruz Smith. I love his Arkadyurenko's books, and I've enjoyed novels by David Mitchell, like Cloud Atlas and The Bone Clocks. He's become a recent favorite of mine. And but of course I try to stay on top of the great work that's being done by my peers, the people who are writing in weird fiction nowadays. And there's such a it's hard to keep up with them because there's so many people writing good quality work now that it's intimidating to try to keep up with them all. And I can't keep up with every book that each one of them writes, but I try to get a sample from as many of them as I can. They're doing a lot of great stuff, the people, my contemporaries. But I do like to read, I like to read as widely as I can. Fiction, I prefer, of course, reading than nonfiction, but I'll read Nabokov and Thomas Hardy and Lovecraft and Ligotti and just,
there was a
A.S. Byatt.
Is there anything you borrowed from a non-horror writer in your horror fiction?
Yeah, I part of my interest in the environment of the story, reflecting the psychological state of the characters, came from reading Thomas Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles. I thought it was very interesting that when in the periods in the novel where Tess is doing well, where things look good for her and she discovers love and so forth, it's summertime and everything's verdant and fertile, and there's everything's blossoming. And then later, when her fortunes take a downturn, it's winter. People are trying to dig turnips out of the frozen earth and so forth. And so he uses the seasons and nature to reflect, like I say, what's going on in Tessa's life and her mind, her feelings. And I like that. So I've kind of consciously tried to use that approach in my work, which is of course quite a different nature, but I think that's an approach that can be used in horror and science fiction, where the setting is more than just a physical place. It's also like an extension of the characters, and also that the environment affects the characters as well. They're kind of feeding into each other, setting and character.
Jeff, what does success as a writer mean to you personally?
It definitely doesn't have to do with financial reward, because I wouldn't be here if I thought that after all this time, if I thought I was still going to achieve some some grand financial situation. It's being read and appreciated by whether that's a broad audience or a limited circle of people who truly get you, what you're doing, and appreciate it. That's, to me, success. You know, the greater that audience, the better, of course. But as long as there are people who are looking forward to your next book, you must be doing something right. And that's a really wonderful feeling. That there are people who will come into me and they'll say, oh, I've read, they'll post on Facebook their collection of my books, and there'll be quite a few books there, and it makes me proud to think that somebody would come back after reading one book and want another one. So that's to me a feeling of personal success. I guess that's what you have to think of in terms of personal success, as opposed to a sense of success in what the public might deem success. Right. You got to gauge success by your own standards.
That's a really evolved level of thinking. Did you always feel that way, that it didn't have to be financial success to be successful?
Well, it came by necessity, really, I think, because when I first started out and I'm selling short stories, and I read what the readership was for even a magazine like Horror Show or Twilight Zone magazine or something. I was surprised to see how few people actually read them, as opposed to what I thought the audience would be for those magazines. And it kind of scaled down my expectations. And getting published in small press magazines at first with limited readership and so forth. So it came, like I say, by necessity. I just kind of realized I had a more realistic sense of what this was going to be like. And as the small checks came in and so forth, I knew this was going to have to be something I continued to do for the love of it, which is all it was in the beginning too. When I was a teenager writing stories that would go straight in the closet, so to speak, after being written and have no audience whatsoever.
Sure.
It's so maybe in the very beginning I thought, I'm going to, because the world was smaller then. There was no internet. I didn't know how many writers were out there. I thought I was a rare of a small percentage of people that would give me more chance to be discovered and to make it big. And as I saw, there were a lot. As I get a broader view and more, then I realized, it's I'm not going to be one of the. It's not going to be Clive Barker, Stephen King, and Jeffrey Thomas. It's never going to be like that. And so the reality was assimilated pretty quickly.
I don't want to speak for you, Jeff, obviously, but it has to feel pretty successful too, having other writers that you admire and respect playing in your sandbox.
For sure. That sometimes I have to sit back and say, wow, that's like something beyond that I would have dreamed of in the past. Something like that is not, as much as you might fantasize early on about success, the fact that multiple people would want to write stories about a place that I dreamed up, or the role-playing game that is is underway that is being close to being released now. A role-playing game set in Punktown. It's just really, really cool, and a graphic novel, a Punktown graphic novel that people are trying to launch. It's just sometimes I feel almost disconnected from it. When I go to my day job every day, and it's like, is that happening to me or is that happening to somebody else? It's just exciting, and it uplifts me at times when I'm feeling kind of a despair and the kind of like, why am I even doing this kind of a thing? You have to kind of step back and say, well, look at this,
Right.
All those stories you wrote as a teenager, did you preserve them, that you put in the closet?
Yeah, I still have most of them. There was some water damage one time that I had to throw away some stuff. That was hard, but I've saved quite a lot of it. And
do you ever take one of those and expand it into a current story? Take the basic idea and rewrite it now that you're a much more talented writer?
Yeah, I think about that sometimes. I think about doing that. I don't know if I ever will, but it does cross my mind. I could see the roots of Punktown in some of the older novels I wrote as a teenager about Earth colonists and other worlds and culture clash and themes like that have interested me for quite a while.
Cole wants to know, Jeffrey, does he outline, plot heavily, or let it flow?
I'm much more of a let it flow, organic kind of writer. The only time I've ever outlined was when I was forced to. When I was approached to write the Game Workshop had a line of books called Black Library, and they had the rights to the New Line Cinema franchises: Friday the 13th, Jason X, Nightmare on Elm Street, Final Destination, and they approached some writers to write original books in those franchises, and they asked me if I would, and so I pitched them a Jason X plot that they liked, and they were going to go with that, but they had a number of those Jason X books in the pipe already, so they wanted to see how those went before they gave me the green light to go with mine. I had to give them a chapter by chapter outline for that, and so while we were waiting to see if that would happen, I sent them a pitch for a Nightmare on Elm Street novel, and they liked my pitch, so they said, give us the chapter by chapter outline for that. That one got green lighted, and that one went ahead. The Jason X one never went ahead because this soon after all of this they discontinued the series. But they did require me to write a chapter by chapter outline, which I didn't even think I could do. I almost told them, like, we're gonna have to forget this. This isn't the way I work. But as I started it, it came easier than I thought. It was like writing a very bare bones story. It was the outline is a story. It's just not fleshed out. And then it felt liberating once it came time. Once that got green lighted, then I knew everything was going to happen, and it was just I could sit back and kind of enjoy it and flesh it out. The same process was required for Deadstock and Blue War because it was the same publisher, just a different imprint. It was Solaris books, but they were also an imprint from Game Workshop. Although later on, the Solaris imprint was sold to another publisher. But I was required to, when I wrote Deadstock and Blue War, to supply a chapter by chapter outline, character sketches, who was going to be in it, and what were they about, and so forth. And it was a different way for me to work. And those are the only 3 books that I ever outlined. It was not something that I would choose to do, but something that I was able to adapt myself to.
When you were following the outline, did you ever decide, oh, I really could do that differently?
Yeah, I followed Deadstock pretty closely. Blue War, it didn't quite time out the way I had hoped. I was spending maybe a little too much time on certain aspects of the story that I realized, wow, I can't fit in this. There's a kind of a gangster subplot, and I had to pare that down. I didn't I have the room for it. And I just turned it in that way, and there was nothing about oh, hey, you left out this chapter or the scene or whatever. I didn't want to go too off track though, because I was sitting with two of the editors of Solaris at ReaderCon once, and they were complaining about one of their writers who had really gone off from his outline, and I thought, oh, okay, well, I better not do this.
Obviously, you were writing from a young age. How did you and Scott, your brother, for those who don't know, Jeff's brother Scott is a writer. How did you guys influence and encourage each other with your writing? Did it work out that way, or were you in your own little separate bubbles?
No, it absolutely worked that way. We would write our own little stories, and then read each other's stories and comment on them, and then we kind of try to outdo each other, you know, and in a friendly way, never in a bitter or hostile way. But it was that kind of one-upmanship, I think, that kind of forced us to try to improve our skills. But we very much encouraged each other, and I think we owe each other a lot in that way, even though our styles and what we're interested in is fairly different. Right now I'm reading one of Scott's collections. It's the last book of his that I had not read previously. It's his short story collection, Urn and Willow, and I'm about halfway through it, and it's just amazing to me, and it's almost depressing. It is depressing that he isn't better known than he is. I just read.
Yeah, I feel that way about you and your brother.
Scott is just you published his short novel, The Sea of Ash, and I just read a story of his called The Seed of Increased Severance in his book, The Urn and Willow, and it's just as I'm reading, I'm thinking, this is remarkable. Had I not read The Sea of Ash, I would have thought that this story was tour de force, but I don't know how seriously people could take me. It's my brother, nepotism and all, but he is truly remarkable.
He is what Scott was sort of the jumping off point for me to do the Lovecraftian Press part of this project, to start publishing books. Because I thought, as I've told you several times, that The Sea of Ash just wasn't very well known at the time. It had a limited run, and I thought more people need to read this. And so that's what started it all.
Yeah.
So now you need to, as long as we're on the subject of Scott, you need to get on your brother, tell him I need that sequel, because a lot of people want it.
Yeah, Scott's somebody who needs to have the whip cracked a little bit. Joe Pulver's been cracking the whip on him recently to get a story finished, and I think he could use that little encouragement, But he's something else.
Well, speaking of Sea of Ash, you guys put that together as a dual book, right? Originally, that was like one half story yours, one half story his. Can you talk a little bit how that came about?
Sean Wallace of Prime asked us to do that. He had this cover image. It was an image created by Travis Anthony Sumas of a woman lying on a beach, and there was this kind of temple or building in the background. He said, "Could you both write a novella based on this image, kind of your own take on what this image could be about?" And so Scott and I went without any discussion, and we wrote our respective stories. But before we did that, Scott suggested the title. He said, why don't we call this book The Sea of Flesh and Ash? And one of us will write The Sea of Flesh, and one will write The Sea of Ash. And I said, I want the flesh. And he said, okay, good, because I wanted the ash. So we went our separate ways and did not talk about what the story was going to be like. And then when they were finished, we read each other's work. And but unfortunately, the book was postponed at Prime for a number of years. And so I finally asked for it to be released. And we gave it to a small publisher, Pterodan Press. But it really got very little exposure. So I took my novella, The Sea of Flesh, and I incorporated it into a short story collection of mine called Worship the Night, which was published by Dark Renaissance, Joe Morey's Dark Renaissance Press. And Scott, again, his Sea of Ash was published independently by Lovecraftian Press. So it was good that we finally gave those stories a wider readership separately than they had enjoyed together. But that was how it came about. It was a joint project.
Yeah. It's amazing how with the same inspiration, both of you guys came up with something so different, but both wonderful stories.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Jeff, guys?
Sure, I have one.
Sure.
Jeffrey, you've had a lot of success, it sounds like to me, with, role-playing game, graphic novels, tribute collection, Centipede. So you seem like you've had a lot of success to me. I know I was really glad to get you to sign with Hippocampus for a collection. It's a big name for us. So, but do you feel like, you do have a lot of readers. Do you like to meet your readers? Do you like to go to conventions and stuff? You mentioned ReaderCon. Do you enjoy that?
I struggle with it, actually, because I'm a kind of a reclusive person, introverted, shy, however you want to put it. It's a little frustrating for me because I have friends whom I've met through Facebook and so forth in the community, and I love them. I still feel kind of maybe overly awkward or self-conscious or whatever. So I kind of sometimes force myself to go to a ReaderCon or a Necronomicon. Usually when I'm there, I feel better. It's kind of more the anticipation of it than the actually being at the con, interacting with people. I probably interact with people better on a one-on-one basis if I go out for, at the last Necronomicon, I went out for coffee with Mike and the artist Dave Felton, and it was very comfortable. It was just the three of us. So that's probably a better scenario for me. But when people come up to me at a convention and tell me that they've read one of my books or like my writing, whatever, it's definitely rewarding to meet them. And at the first Necronomicon I went to in 2013, I sat down to have a couple of beers with Justin Steele and Sam Cowan. Justin having gone on to be the fiction editor at Strange Eons, and Sam.
What is that? I don't know what that is.
Yeah, he kind of took a step down there, but whatever.
How dare you?
Well,
Sorry, I derailed you. And Sam then going on to Dim Shores.
Yeah, Sam going down to Dim Shores. So it's cool because when we sat down, it was one of the best moments for me. One of the best memories from that I have of Necronomicon. But at the time, the three of us really didn't know each other at all. We just three guys who just kind of, hey, let's have some, we just kind of started talking, and it was great. And now we've collaborated and on a number of projects. It's really cool.
Are you going this year, Jeff?
I will. I was telling people that I wouldn't go. I'll push myself to go. I have to go. I have to. My book, Haunted World, is going to premiere in Necronomicon, and how could I not go? I'll be all right. I'll get through it.
Yeah, I remember a great lunch that we had at one of them where we went to a Mexican food place, and it was me and your brother and quite a few other people. You think you were there too, Pete?
Yep. Yeah.
That's a good memory.
Yeah, I remember that. Tommy Broadbent and different people were there, and
yeah.
But and I, Jeff, I'll echo. I have a problem with large crowds.
Mm-hmm.
I do have, when there's like 8 conversations going on around me, I kind of freak.
Yeah.
I don't deal well. I deal well if we have a dinner party and I can focus on somebody next to me. That's much easier.
Yeah.
But when that whole crowd presses in, I just want to leave.
I think I need to remember that I'm not the only one who feels that way. The more people I talk to about it, the more I hear people say like you just did. And I think maybe it's something about the type of people we are, the creative people, whatever. And I think it's a common reaction. It is better when you focus on, like I said, I remember I went to dinner once. Tom Lynch treated us all to dinner at the first Necronomicon.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I sat near Mike Griffin, and I kind of focused on him. It's just, like you said, it's easier to kind of,
Yeah.
the bigger picture, it gets a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
I'm the same way too, and for me, it's even worse because being half deaf, one of the problems is if you're in a quiet room, like right now, I've got headphones on, so we're in a virtual quiet room. We can talk, and it's quite easy for me. But you get a bunch of people in a room, and what happens with my hearing is that they all kind of meld together. I can hear that there's a bunch of talking going on, but I can't pick out what anyone's saying. So I have to intensely concentrate to pick out any one conversation. So it's kind of stressful.
Yeah.
In addition to what you and Pete are talking about too, I don't like the crowds. So, or I'm not as comfortable with them as I should be. Perhaps is a better way of putting it. I don't know.
I remember when I first came into the lobby for the first Necronomicon I attended. There was a kind of a babble of voices in the lobby, but the voice that I recognized that kind of cut through and that I focused on was yours, Mike. I heard you talking. I was, that's Mike Davis, and that was the first person who I recognized when I.
Why is that? Because of the show?
Yeah, I think I just recognized your voice from the show. I heard your voice, and that's Mike Davis. And it kind of gave me, as I walked into the lobby, it kind of gave me an anchor.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
Yeah.
Any more questions for Jeff, guys? No?
Well, no, but I will say that I just picked up Worship the Night, and I have to admit, I'm embarrassed to admit, I haven't read any of the Punktown stuff. I had only read your other stuff and The Endless Fall, and of course the piece that you submitted to Strange Eons. So I wanted to kind of get into this, and you talking and everybody talking about Punktown was kind of like, well, I better get in on this shit. I'm way behind.
As usual, yeah, you are.
I don't have any questions, but I want to share what I have.
Okay.
Oh.
Let me put you on the screen, Pete. Hold that up.
Wow.
There you go.
What is that?
One of Jeff's books.
And then there was
pretty unique title.
Yeah.
And then, of course, The Sea of Flesh and Ash.
Oh yeah,
Cool,
you got the
cool.
original.
This I love.
Everybody Scream.
Everybody Scream.
I like titles with exclamation points in them.
Right?
Joe Pulver thinks he's the exclamation point king, but I don't remember seeing any of his book titles with exclamation points in them.
Good
There's
point.
only one exclamation point,
This
though,
was a
Jeffrey.
great
You got a lot of points to catch up on.
It's not how many you use, it's how you use it.
That reminds me of the old horror movies like Scream and Scream Again.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was a Hammer movie, wasn't it?
If it wasn't a Hammer, it was made with everybody who would be in a Hammer movie.
Yeah.
Well, the book is titled The Endless Fall and Other Weird Fictions, and it's a great collection. And I'm feel privileged to have been able to publish it. So thank you, Jeffrey.
Well, thank you for wanting to publish a collection of mine.
It's available in print and Kindle, so go and buy it if you haven't done so already. Jeff, we're going to talk about a few other things. You're welcome to stick around, or if you want to leave, that's fine too. If you need to be with Jade,
I'll stick around unless she gets to it.
All right, sounds good. Peasley Papers, Pete Rawley.
What?
Yeah,
What?
I'm springing this on you.
Oh, what the hell's the Peasley Papers?
I don't know. Figure something out and talk about it real quick.
The Peasley Papers. Okay, so for about 2 years, we've been talking about a secret project. And I guess it's ready to be talked about in public. This secret project, revealed here for the first time, is the Peasley Papers. It's a collection of stories dealing with Wingate and Nathaniel Peasley and their ancestors and descendants. And it's subtitled A Lovecraftian Chronicle because it spans the period from essentially the Triassic period through the heat death of the universe.
Wow.
There are stories set in Roman times in the 1920s. There's a story that I love called the I can't even think of the name anymore. But it is a complete rewrite of The Shadow Out of Time, told from another character's point of view, actually multiple characters' point of view, on the expedition to in Australia, which surprisingly I could not find it where anybody had done that before.
That was one of my favorite stories by Lovecraft.
Yeah,
One of my very favorites, The Shadow Out of Time.
Mine too.
Yes, and a lot of these stories deal with, because they're Peasleys, it deal with the Yith and time travel and the horrors and joys of time travel. There is a Groundhog's Day story, which I love. There are stories that one of the stories that Mike loves the most is the time traveler's ex-wife, which I think both he and I, it's a Lovecraftian story, but it's a completely different kind of Lovecraftian story. And there's a sequel to that. It's called The Very Long Lunch.
So you're kind of burying the lead here, though. Is this all you, Pete, or is this
all me?
Okay.
This is a complete 100,000 words plus collection of stories dealing with one family's life and interactions with time travel and the Yith.
And when is it published?
And who's publishing it?
It is going to be published by the Lovecraft Easy.
Yes.
Who is
The
that?
book is done. The editing is done. The cover is
Wonderful
90% done. And
Yeah, we're getting there.
I think we're going to release it at Necronomicon.
Sounds great.
I think we should be okay for that table now that we've got the cover. I think we'll be all right.
Holy cow! So this is a big surprise, and you're releasing it in a couple of months.
Yeah.
Wow. Who's doing the cover? Who's the cover artist?
Go ahead. Raven Demogorgon?
Yeah. I don't think you guys know him, but I'll preview the cover sometime soon on the message board. But yeah, he did a great job, didn't he, Pete?
Yeah, he did. There was a lot of false starts, but what we did finally was we ripped off the original Astounding Stories cover and redid that with an updated version and a more horrific version of the monster of the Yithian. So kind of cool. I had a lot of fun doing this because for me it's straddling it's somewhere between horror, science fiction, and fantasy because I've been able to play with a lot of different settings. There's a couple Roman stories. There's a couple of alt history stories. There's a couple of stories that pay homage to Cordwainer Smith, and the whole idea of multiverse and multiple times and alt history. Everything I've ever thought about in time travel and all of my Peasley stories about Pandora Peasley and her sisters all show up in this book except for one. I could not get the rights for one story.
And what was that story?
It is in the Dark Regions book that just came out, where they do the end of the world.
Oh, yes. Yeah, Return of the Old Ones.
Return of the Old Ones, yes.
Okay. So if you want a complete thing and you buy this book, you've got to get the story also in Return of the Old Ones.
Yeah, except
luckily I already have.
Yes. Yeah. If you want to be a completist, yes. You can live without that story. It's
a Rollick completist.
A Rollick completist. Oh God. Is there such a thing? But it wouldn't be, but I was even able to sneak a Herbert West story in there. It even includes, oddly enough, it includes my story in the Hall of the Yellow King, which was like one of the first stories I ever printed.
Isn't that the sci-fi one?
It is.
Yeah.
Well, I can't imagine being a Lovecraftian and not wanting this book.
First of all, I had a lot of fun. Like the story opens up with the crucifixion of Yig, which I know Rick has read. and ends with the heat death of the universe. And it's just, I wish you had told me you were going to do this. I would have prepped more. But
no, you did great. This is basically
Yeah,
we just wanted to tell people it was coming.
yeah.
He says after talking for 20 minutes.
Yeah, I think you did fine.
All right. It's been so long since I've actually looked at the stories. I can't even read.
That was like 5 minutes before the show, and I was looking at. I think I'll talk about this after the show. Wrote down Peasley papers, so and didn't bother to tell Pete. So
No, thanks. A whole.
all right. So anyway, the gist of this is the Peasley papers are coming soon.
Yes, and
To an Amazon near you.
Yes, and it'll contains not only 50,000 words that I've already previously written, but 50,000 new words.
Wow.
And those words are in stories. They are not just typed.
They're not just random things on the page.
Yeah, they're completely different words, right? They're not just all the same.
It's not the. But yeah.
I am really
Right.
looking forward to this. I didn't hear anything about
Right,
this,
it's a
and Mike and I talk constantly, so this is very cool.
Well, you know what, Kelly? Maybe you could write the introduction.
Do we need
Well,
an introduction?
Yeah, I don't think you need.
Does
an
every
introduction.
collection need an introduction? I've wrestled with that.
I feel like Pete's introduction should be, and now, a man who gets more weird tale than an H.P. Lovecraft anthology.
Oh,
Pete Rollick!
you're just saying that because I've been married quite a few times.
All right, so that happened.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we're on a roll about Lovecraft Easing Press today because we talked about the Endless Fall, now Peasley papers. Now, here's another first-time announcement. Lovecraftian Tales, Stories of Weird Fiction and Cosmic Horror, Volume 1. The Lovecraft Easing, the magazine side of Lovecraft Easing, of the Lovecraft Easing project, is evolving into a book series. So it will no longer be a magazine. It'll be an anthology series. And here's the first one. It's already available on Amazon. Just, search for Lovecraftian Tales. It's available in print and Kindle, and it's 7 stories. It's $2.99 on Kindle and $6.95 print. So it's pretty economical. And it's not that I won't ever publish someone like Pete or Philip Fracassi or Rick or whoever who's been published quite a bit. But the main goal of this anthology series is kind of like the magazine, where I'm trying to help writers who've not been published a lot sort of get a start. So that's what this is. And I think it turned out really well.
Holy cow, that is really cool. But also, so are you saying then the magazine ends at the last issue we just saw?
I like to say that the magazine is evolving, but yeah, you could put it that way.
Okay.
I don't, for like 6 years, I've been dishing out free stories. I've paid for stories and they've been free to read on the Lovecraft Easing website. So there's 6 years worth of stories out there. There's a hell of a lot of stories. It's got to be several hundred. But I've got bills just like everybody else, and I need to be able to pay my writers and actually get some money back and all that jazz. And honestly, books get more attention than magazines in a lot of ways. And so I think for the writers too, this is a good thing because this is going to sell more copies.
Yeah.
So I think it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. Who did the cover art on that? That's gorgeous.
Heather Landry is her name.
I love it.
And by the way, in this series, and we'll probably continue to do this, there is interior art for each story. So
Cool.
Is
How
that going to
many-
be quarterly or?
it's going to be whenever Mike gets his lazy ass in gear, probably 2 to 3 times a year.
Okay.
I would say, but I don't want to tie myself down to. And that was another thing. The magazine started getting a little bit stretched out. I'm a little stretched, so this helps in that regard too.
Will there be subscriptions to it, or you just?
It's a book. So no subscriptions.
Subscriptions to this series.
Yeah. And last but not least, it's edited by Matthew Carpenter and Alex Kreitner. So
Who is that? I don't know who those people are.
I don't know. I just grabbed the names out of the phone book, to be honest. I did all the work.
You found these guys on the street and just, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to be humble by putting their names on there. So no, Alex and Matt did a hell of a lot of work on this and selected the stories, and they did a great job. So you know they're going to be the editors for this little series. I'll still do other anthologies, like I'm not going to announce that today, but you know I did Autumn Cthulhu, and I want to do other anthologies like that where there's a lot of invite only, like you know I invited Laird Barron and Jeff and Scott and Pete and a lot of other people. So
Sure.
we'll still do those too. That's kind of separate from this.
What's the submission process going to be for the new anthology series? Is it going to be the same as what you're doing for?
Same.
Yeah.
Asking for a friend.
Yeah.
I would say we're not accepting submissions right now because we've got plenty, but you don't turn down a Jeff Thomas submission whenever he sends it to you. So whenever you want to send me something, I'm all for it.
Right.
You turned down a Pete Rawlix story.
Oh,
so-
of course. Yeah, I didn't want to say that, but since you said it.
If I ever get out of my writer's block.
Yeah, right. All right, so there's that. Kelly had a suggestion a while back that we talk about our 3 favorite Stephen King stories. So,
I did.
Kelly, since it was your idea, why don't you go first?
Geez, that was a year ago.
Hey, I get to it when I get to it.
I think that my
You young
idea.
people are so impatient.
Let's just throw out what the rules of this are. My idea was originally it was going to be 3 favorite short stories, but I think that we put this out as a just basic 3 favorite stories, right?
Sure, I don't care.
Okay. I went with short stories because I think that King, up until recently, I think King is the master of the short story, and I think that he's had trouble with endings on his novels. And until recently, that last collection of short stories he did, I thought that he could do no wrong in the short form, but that last collection was really, really rough. So my 3 that I picked out in order of publication, and by publication, I'm calling them when they were collected publication. So The Mangler from Night Shift, which is about a possessed laundry pressing machine, which is just an insane premise and hilarious because it gets accidentally possessed by the blood of a virgin and various things happening that bring
I still
this.
remember the ending of that story after all these years. It was already out or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, spoiler warning on a 40-year-old story. This thing tears itself out of the laundry building it's in and goes on a rampage. That's where the story ends. So how can you not love that? And that is kind of what I love about Big Steve as a writer. He goes for the Ray Bradbury type stories, which he just says, this is what happened. And I'm not going to tell you exactly why this kind of stuff could happen. It's just what happened. So that goes into my next story, which was Uncle Otto's Truck from Skeleton Crew, which is about a boy who's talking with his uncle, and the guy has an old beat up truck that sits out in the lawn, but daily gets closer and closer. You can't see it move, but it is moving until finally it runs over the uncle in his home. Although it doesn't really run over him, they just find the uncle dead, and he's got like a couple of spark plugs and oil hanging out of his mouth. And for some reason, this truck has decided to kill him. I just love these kind of stories. And it's so funny because these are the kind of things that I write, and then in script form, I send something to Philip, and Philip Ficassi, our regular script guy here on the Easing podcast, and he'll just be like, the audience is going to want you to explain why this person is turning into a spider. And I'm like, fuck you! No explanations.
I remember you sent me that script too, and I disagreed with a professional screenwriter, and I still think I was right.
I do too. And And that brings me to my last and maybe most favorite Stephen King story, and that is The Moving Finger in Nightmares and Dreamscapes, which is about a guy who discovers a finger sticking out of the drain of one of his sinks that's moving around. And it's such a disturbing story, and all the things he does to try to get rid of this finger, like pouring various chemicals down. And that one is literally never explained why there is a finger coming out of his
Kelly,
sink.
isn't that the same story? It has been years since I read that, but that's a great story. Doesn't he always also say something in that story like, why do bad things happen to good people? And the answer is don't ask.
Oh, I don't remember
Something
that, but I think that's the theme of Stephen King.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the master of introducing you to a ton of characters, and at this point, 40 years down the road, we know, well, I better not get too attached to this guy because he's going to die. Obviously, I like him the best, so he'll be dead before too long. So those are the three stories I picked out. And I put this out there because I was curious to hear what the panel thought. I like hearing everybody else's thoughts.
Well, you're wrong, of course. But
Right, and
did
also,
you want me to add anything to that, or?
no, I was lying. Really, I just like to hear the sound of my voice, so we can move on to another topic if we want.
All right, who wants to go next?
If nobody else wants to do it, I'll do it.
I've got three, but I'll go after you.
All right, so Graveyard Shift. Graveyard Shift is was made into a really bad movie, and trust me, that will be a theme. It's about some guys who have to go into this old mill and clean it out, and they encounter some very large rodents, and things do not go well for anybody.
Like in The Princess Bride?
Yes, rodents of unusual size.
So sort of like a Lovecraft story.
Yeah, well, for me, I always thought that Graveyard Shift was sort of this bridging story between Henry Kuttner's The Graveyard Rats and Lovecraftian, the other Lovecraftian monsters. So in my mind, even though the stories are like 50 years apart, they all fit together. And I make a slight reference to Graveyard Shift in Reanimators. The second story from Night Shift that I love is Children of the Corn. Once again, made into a not so great movie, but
I'll fight you on that one.
Well, you know what? I will tell you that every time it comes on, I watch the motherfucker.
It is compelling. It is not very good, but it is a compelling movie.
It's compelling. But He Who Walks Behind the Rose, oh my God. In my personal Cthulhu mythology, He Who Walks Behind the Roads is a Lovecraftian monster.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then I think one of my favorite stories, and it's one of these rare pieces of science fiction, The Jaunt.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Great story.
The Jaunt is about this technology that allows you to instantly teleport between worlds, but you have to be asleep when you do it. And then there's the little boy who pretends to go to sleep. He doesn't take whatever drug they're supposed to take. And he comes out the other end and he's like, it's not instantaneous. It's, oh my God, I've been alive for thousands and thousands of years.
It's longer than you think, Dad, or something like that. Yeah.
And,
what is with your dog? Your dog doesn't like Stephen King?
No, he wants some attention. So
He likes Cujo. He's saying, I like Cujo.
Yeah.
Pete identifies with the Jaunt because Pete is that little boy.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
All right. Well, my three favorites, here we go. N, which I think Rick was probably going to say, based on a previous conversation. I don't remember which collection these are in. Maybe you guys do.
N was in that last collection, and as far as I'm concerned, it was the only one worth reading in that last collection.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. But N is sorry.
I was going to say it's from recent interviews influenced by Arthur Macken's The Great God Pan, which I didn't see when I first read it.
Yeah. Well, it's cosmic horror, definitely, and it's one of my favorite stories. And I've said this on the show before, but if you've not heard me say it, read the story. But also, if you've got audible.com, get the audiobook. Just for that story alone, it's worth a credit.
There's a comic book adaptation too.
I'm sorry?
There's a comic book adaptation.
Oh, yes, there is.
Yeah.
But them reading the story, they have 3 different readers, you know, for the story. And it is just so well done. You know, listen to it at night and to get the full effect. I just love that story.
The readers take the 3 parts of the story, I'm guessing.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, that sounds cool. Okay.
Yeah, it's very well done. Mrs. Todd's Shortcut
that's a good
is
one.
also one of my favorites. And I think, not that it has to be Lovecraftian for me to like it, you know, just weird fiction, but I think there's quite the Lovecraftian vibe there too. But there's just something so mysterious about that story. You know, what the hell is going on?
There's a Twilight Zone kind of a vibe to it.
Yeah. I mean, and my last one is Crouch End.
Yeah.
So, and Tim, sorry, I'm blanking on the actor's name. The guy who played the clown in It.
Curry?
Tim Curry read Crouch End in the audiobook. Did a great job. So, anybody else?
I didn't care for Crouch End. I thought that was a lot of name dropping, but no real substance.
Okay, you can be wrong. It's fine.
It worked better when I saw the television adaptation of it.
That was pretty good, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then I got to, because when I first read it in New Tales of the Cthulhu Mythos, I wasn't impressed. But when I saw it adapted on television, I got to appreciate it more, and I reread it, and I liked it more than I had originally liked it.
You know, for some reason, I'm kind of a sucker for stories that are stories within stories like that. You know, it begins where he's telling somebody else what happened previously.
Right.
I don't know.
I like that one.
Who else wants to do it?
Yeah, I've got mine.
All right.
I'm going to go with Apt Pupil for a non-supernatural, more of a almost Robert Bloch type story.
Yeah.
It was the Nazi and the young kid. It was made into a fairly decent movie.
Yeah.
Ian McKellen was excellent in it. And I also liked a novella he wrote called Sundog Trail, which is about taking, if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I read it. You're taking this photograph and this dog keeps getting closer and closer.
Yes, but I thought that was just called Sundog.
Maybe it's called Sundog. Maybe I'm
or Sun something. Yeah, the Polaroid. The dog keeps getting closer and closer.
Yeah, I may be confusing it with a Jack London story. That's, I thought it was Sundog Trail. And I like The Library Policeman, which was sort of a shorter version of it, of it to some way, and that it had a concept in it, but it handled it in a much shorter format, which made it more effective. And that was, you know, we always have these horror stories where you take the cross out and show it to a vampire, or your elder sign repels something from the Cthulhu mythos. And the concept here was that can work if you believe in something strong enough to repel evil. And it could be licorice. Doesn't have to be some religious talisman. And I kind of like that.
I've not read, I have not read The Library Policeman. I need to read it.
It takes an uncomfortable turn.
So it's a Stephen King story?
Right. Yeah, good point.
I think it Well, I don't want to give away. I was wondering, is this going to end well or end badly?
Those are the two choices.
Yeah.
And because it was Stephen King, you decided end badly.
I don't think it does, if my memory is correct.
All right, now I have to read it, and I'll discuss it with you after I read it.
All right.
Did you get all three in?
Yeah, I got all three.
Okay, I couldn't remember. I just wanted to jump in again and say that what the hell are you holding up? Oh, that's your dog, Pete. The foreword by Stephen King to Night Shift is my favorite of all time. You guys remember that? Where I'll just read the first few sentences. Let's talk, you and I. Let's talk about fear. The house is empty as I write this. A cold February rain is falling outside. It's night. And then it just gets better from there. So read it. Pick up Night Shift if you haven't read the foreword, and read the foreword.
Any chance that even with such short notice, Jeffrey and Derek have some Stephen King suggestions?
I hope so. Jeff?
Well, it would be hard for me to come up with three at the moment, but
That's fine.
I'll talk about his story. I love the Night Shift collection. I'll talk about a story, Jerusalem's Lot, and I would have to come back to read it to see if on its own, if it's just if it's a good Stephen King story or if it's a good Lovecraft pastiche. But when I read that, I had never read Lovecraft. I was aware of Lovecraft, but I had never read him. This was in the 80s. And so I read Jerusalem's Lot, and I thought, wow, this is very different for a King story. This is a whole different kind of voice or tone for him. I really like this. And then I realized what he was doing. He was paying tribute to another writer. And that's what inspired me to start reading Lovecraft himself. So I have a fondness for that story because of that, because it guided me down that road. Like I said, I would have to come back to that story to see if, having read Lovecraft now, would I be impressed with that story the same way?
You are not alone. That is how I discovered Lovecraft. And I know for a fact, at least Aaron Vanek, who ran the Lovecraft Film Festival in San Pedro, that's the same way he found Lovecraft as well, was through that story.
Really?
Wow. That is one of the best uses of Robert Bloch's Mysteries of the World.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Derek?
what else, Jeff? I don't want to put you on the spot, but you got to know other Stephen King stories.
Well, of course, yeah, of course. But I don't know any that I would, and perhaps some of them I remember, but not by their title. There was another one in Night Shift, the one that the cover alludes to, with I think it's an astronaut who comes.
I am
yes.
the doorway.
Yeah.
Yes, I am the doorway. That's it.
That one appealed to me a lot.
Well, that's
And,
quite Lovecraftian as well, wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And for some just a story that's just grueling and intense is Survivor type, with the guy starving to death on an island and self-cannibalizing himself. That one made an impression on me, I guess.
I think King said that was his gross out story.
Yeah.
He deliberately really wanted to think of the most grossest thing he could come up with.
Yeah, it's pretty gross. So it's memorable. I can tell you my least favorite Stephen King story was the one where the guy gets trapped in a porta potty, and it's
That's a whole novel.
Yeah, it's like a novel. It's like,
McKee.
oh my God, is he just trying to see what he can get away with? You know?
Yeah, that's not Doom McKee. What are you talking about?
That's not Doom McKee.
It's,
Go home, you're drunk.
Doom McKee is the water goddess.
Right.
But I thought it was pretty appalling. It was a novella, at least. It was I don't know.
I don't know which one that one was.
It was in his last collection there, the one with N in it, I believe.
Okay, Derek, you want to throw anything out there or no?
Yeah, sure. I'm a little rusty as far as Stephen King short stories. I probably prefer his novels. So
Yeah, throw one of those out if you want.
Well, I mean, as far as stories go, a lot of what people have already said are some of my favorites. The ones, probably not surprisingly, that are Lovecraft influenced. Graveyard Shift is one of my favorites because it reminded me of the Rats in the Walls with the subterranean levels and rats undergoing evolution, growing wings. I thought that was like a logical follow-up to the Rats in the Walls and what might have been taking place down there over long, long periods of time. And Jerusalem's Lot, because of the similarities to The Whisper in Darkness, with the letters going back and forth. And I thought it was adapted well, pretty well, into a movie, but they had to get rid of those letters because otherwise it would just be, two guys reading their mail. And I thought that was made into a pretty good movie. But for the novels, actually, I like the novels because most of them weren't directly Lovecraftian. I thought that he had more of an original voice for me in his longer works. So I enjoyed it. I mean, The Stand was one of my early favorites. It, of course. I actually like the Tommyknockers because I have a weak spot for sort of golden age science fiction with lots of gadgets and a cardboard robot and some stuff like that. And
And wasn't that a great movie?
well, no.
No.
Miniseries.
Miniseries, yes.
But
That was terrible.
Yeah, it was a miniseries. It's like 6 hours or something.
Have you read In, Derek? You said you were rusty.
I have not read that yet.
You should try that. It's not directly Lovecraftian, but its influences there.
Well, everybody who I say a lot of people like me read it and thought it was Lovecraftian.
Yeah.
Now we're discovering it wasn't, according to King. But
Well, it can be both Mackin and Lovecraftian.
Well,
right? Cosmic horror in that sense.
Mackin is such a major influence on Lovecraft. Basically, I think the connection to Mackin is that it had a circle of stones in there, which was sort of from the Great God Pan.
All right. Last but not least, and we saved this to last because we're going to discuss spoilers for the last 2 Doctor Who episodes. So anyone who's not interested or hasn't watched it yet can either stop listening and or leave the room. So you've been warned. But what did you think, Rick?
Well, looking back on it, it is somewhat Lovecraftian in that these Tibetan priests are in the tradition of the priests of Leng. And that was how the way, people unfortunately viewed Tibet. Tibet was this land nobody knew about. And it was, the original view was that there were all these horrible devil worshippers there who looked like skeleton things. There's a little of that in Lovecraft's revision for The Last Test. But I liked the first episode a lot because it dealt with a simulated reality.
Yeah, me too.
And I did not expect that. And there is one of the superhero shows did a whole story arc involving that. So we were getting, which was also done very well. So we were getting the same ideas from a different angle.
There is this knowledge that's just too horrible to know or you'll kill yourself type of a Lovecraftian concept in the first episode too.
Yeah, forbidden.
Yeah.
Forbidden books in the Vatican.
Right. What did you think of the second episode then? Yesterday's episode.
I was very suspenseful. I kind of figured out how it was going to go within the last 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But
I was a fan up until the ending, which I thought was, like you said, you knew what was going to happen with his eyes. You knew that Bill was going to do what she did.
Yeah, and that's a big decision to make for one person, even if it's the Doctor.
Absolutely right. I mean, come on, Bill. You screwed up there.
Yeah.
But Bill is a screw up.
She is?
Well,
you don't like Bill?
I'm just wondering, could they do something very clever? Could this turn out to be a simulation too?
I was kind of hoping for that.
I'm just wondering if they're going to pull that out in the last episode.
You know, simulation within a simulation type of thing.
Yeah. Or did he trap them in a simulation somehow? Reverse engineered everything.
Some pretty smart guys think that the odds are heavily in favor that we live in a simulation. So.
Well, they're wrong.
Yeah, well.
We better hope they're wrong.
I think, therefore I am. So, you know, whatever.
Yeah. You know, I run models all the time, and I know what happens to models when you're done with them.
Yeah. And I hate, I'm not trying to make everything Lovecraftian, but that's pretty Lovecraftian.
Yeah.
And, you know, the anthill doesn't need a reason to be stepped on. It just gets stepped on. So, all right. So thumbs up for the Doctor Who episodes, Rick?
I thought these were the best 2 episodes of the season.
Yeah.
They're much stronger than what has come before. So.
I've not been a fan of this season up until now.
Yeah. And, you know, if you go back and you look at my posts, you know, I was not thrilled with the whole what's in the box thing, because it was obvious to me that it was Missy.
Right.
Yeah. That's who I thought it was either going to be Missy or the male version of the Master.
Yeah.
Because we know he's coming back.
Now I think we're in a position where we're going to not have much of a choice but to see the Doctor and Missy work together. And get something much more unusual than anything they've ever encountered before.
It would be interesting if they work against the previous incarnation of the Master.
Yeah.
Is the next episode the last episode of the season, or are there more to come? Do you guys know?
Oh, there are definitely more.
Yeah.
Because
we got a Cybermen episode we haven't seen.
Yep.
And we have a Ice Lord. Those are the masters. Those are the masters of the Ice Warriors.
Guys, I would really love it when this story arc ends. If it's really, there's a question of whether they're in a simulated reality or not, and the question is never answered. I would love an ending like that. So,
have you been watching Class, Pete?
I have picked up a couple episodes here and there. I will admit that I was so turned off by the first couple episodes, well, the first 2 episodes of Doctor Who, that I was catching it in reruns, and therefore not being forced to watch Class.
Yeah.
And
it's picked up. It's going to have its.
I watched last night's episode, and I thought last night's episode was very good.
Yeah, I thought that was unpredictable.
Yeah.
I was on tenterhooks about how the relationship between the 2 main characters in that episode was going to work out.
Yeah, I'm also, you know, there's also going to be an episode of Doctor Who with Chris Marshall in it, coming up towards the end of the season, and I like Chris Marshall as an actor.
that's probably why it was rumored that he's the next Doctor.
Yeah.
And who is Chris Marshall?
Chris Marshall was the young guy with the British accent in Love Actually, He Goes to America to find love. He's also starred in a television series, the second 2 seasons of a television series called Death in Paradise, which he just finished before being whisked away to possibly be rumored to be the next Doctor. And he's a kind of quirky actor. He's very young, very funny. I enjoy his work.
What the hell are you laughing at, Young?
I'm remembering who Pete is talking about in Love Actually. It's Colin, right?
It's Colin, yeah.
Here I come, America, and he's got a huge knob.
You know, I wasn't gonna go there.
I don't know what you guys are talking about. It's probably a good thing.
they've established that the Doctor can regenerate into people he meets
Yes.
physically.
Right. That's how they explain Peter Capaldi looking like a character he met previously.
Which, if you go back to the original series, you now know why Colin Bacon never worked out. Because he was originally a villain.
Right.
On the show.
Oh, he was? I didn't know that.
Before he became, he was like this, a minor villain. He was another Time Lord, and he in fact accused the Doctor at one point.
So Pete, what's your problem with Bill?
No, I don't have a problem with Bill. I like Bill, but Bill is a very different kind of companion.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a long time since the Doctor's been based on Earth and stayed there. And Bill can come and go. But
are you a fan of that? I'm not a fan of that.
Well,
I want him roaming the universe,
Roaming the universe is interesting, absolutely. I think that we need better storytelling chops than we got in the first couple episodes if we're going to stay stationary.
Yeah.
But Bill, has a life outside of the Doctor. Now, Clara had a little bit of that, but it ended up costing her. Bill has a big life outside the Doctor. So it's a little different. It's something we haven't had in a long time.
What did you think of the episode called Oxygen? I thought that was starting to get on the right track because I was very suspenseful.
I thought that was starting to get on the right track too. I'm not sure. I like the whole concept. I'm not sure that I could see it working as a real sci-fi story. Yeah. It's kind of campy. Would you sign a contract on to work in a place where you have to buy your own oxygen?
Yeah.
I'm not sure we would do that, but it works for
I'm pretty sure I wouldn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, recent events in the world may
okay,
things you wouldn't expect them to do without any other elaboration.
Yes, you.
All right. Well, you said Bill's a screw up.
Yeah, I think Bill has a lot of problems, which is okay. I like characters that are flawed, and she's still trying to have this sort of personal life, and that has nothing to do with the Doctor. Why do I keep getting Jeff looking at me when I'm talking?
Because it's so profound.
Yeah, he's really interested in what you're saying.
You're hearing my thoughts.
Maybe he's going, Jesus, what a fucking nerd.
Yeah.
What? Doctor Who?
Yeah. See, the way it works for Kelly Young is if you're talking about something he's interested in, then he's all for it. If it's something he's not interested in, then you're a nerd.
Yeah, Christ, can we get back to comic books, you guys? This nerd talk is really starting to bum me out.
Well, we shouldn't do it this episode, but at some point when Twin Peaks progresses, we could have a discussion of whether that's cosmic horror or not.
All right, we'll do that.
All right.
Which I guess means I have to watch more than the first episode.
Well, just watch the original series.
I've watched the original series.
Okay. Well, then it's cosmic horror. We don't have to have a discussion.
Okay.
Wow, shut it
wow,
down.
There goes one episode of the show right there. All right. All right. Let's see. Who do we have next week? We've got just us. No, I didn't schedule a guest for next week. So
really?
Yes, really. We'll talk to you.
Well, no, it's just
think of things to talk about.
All right, I will.
It's like the second hour, but for 2 hours.
Yes.
I've got a topic. I've discovered some Arthur Machen universe stuff from early 1900s.
That sounds great.
Written not by Machen.
Nice.
All right. If you'd like to win, what was the prize? Let me pull it back up. Children of Lovecraft, edited by Ellen Datlow. Very good book. One of our listeners, David Del Cole, is donating that. If you'd like to win that, I'll choose someone randomly in a week or so. Send an email to lovecraftezineprizes@gmail.com. Lovecraftezineprizes@gmail. And in the subject, put Children of Lovecraft, and whatever you want to put in the body, the email is fine. And I think that's it. We'll see everybody next week. Thanks, guys. Good to talk with y'all.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff.
Jeff.
Good to see you, buddy.
Hi, guys.